Welcome to Master the Game. I am Juice, and today I am talking to Darrin Anderson, the creator of the Kickstarter Dalreth Haven in the Ice. It's a really cool 5e setting that's coming up. But before I get into that, I quickly wanted to just mention tonight we have our stream where we're painting minis, me and my wife. We've been doing it with you guys for about 40 episodes now. And this is night 2 of us each painting a miniature together and sharing the Discord pictures. So if you want to jump in on that, feel free to go over to our Discord. You can share pictures of minis you're painting at the same time as us, and it'll show up on screen. So with that, let's kick it over to Darrin. Introduce yourself, maybe what your project is, and let's get going.
Oh, hi. Yep, absolutely. Nice to have a chat with you here today. My name is Darrin Anderson, and I am producing a Kickstarter project that is a 5e setting. And by setting, it's more than just a campaign setting. There'll be an adventure built into it, and monsters, players, options. It'll be packed with lots of material. One of the things that we wanted to do with this is take a campaign setting that had existed for about 20 years or so that we've run through it, that was an ice setting campaign, and really produce that and put it into a published format. So this is my first Kickstarter with a book. We did a miniature launch a few months ago, and those have been successfully delivered. We did delivery ahead of schedule, even during COVID. We beat it by about a month. Nice. And so we got that delivered. So we do have a few miniatures out on our website at www.dalreth.com. But this will be adding onto that. And those miniatures were iconic characters from the setting. Nice. So if you go out there, you'll see some of the characters. There's a Tutmosis Slip. He's a were-polar bear that my son created, and there'll be other characters out there as well. So really kind of at a high level, the plan is to get what we have run in multiple role-playing systems. And it's evolved over the years because 5e hasn't been around for 20 years, and really get that up to shape, get it professionally edited, and we're going to do some play testing and be able to launch that so that other people could then take what we've been accumulating in closets and backpacks and everything that we put together for the adventures and play it themselves.
That's awesome. So you said you've been doing this setting for 20 years. This is your own setting, correct?
Yes, this is a unique setting that we started back in the late 90s. And the concept of how it's set up is a little bit unique. One of the things we noticed is that in most professional published settings, they never talk about the Southern Hemisphere, the ice cap, so the South Pole. For in essence. So if you look at Middle Earth, we were playing some Middle Earth role-playing, MERP at the time, and there's no southern continent. There's nothing below, even in MERP, below the Court of Ardor, which was kind of an elven kingdom down there. So what we decided was to say this could be I would call it a continent-size setting that could be dropped into any other setting that you're using. It could be the South Pole of anything that you're playing, because I don't know of too many that have covered it. And so a lot of what our research was what does that mean if you're on the South Pole, and how do you have a sustainable life, and how does all that? So we worked the background up as to how it happened. It was a cataclysm, and I can go into more detail on that, but that's really the design of it.
Nice. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, this sounds interesting. I have never looked into like how the South Pole could be sustainable. So
and I can explain it all. So one of the things that my involvement with the South Pole, we played some Call of Cthulhu, and way back in the day, and the Beyond the Mountains of Madness was set on the South Pole. So that was some interest that I had back in my cartography days. So the South Pole was always of interest to me, but I also interviewed, I'm a project manager by day, and I interviewed for a position on the South Pole with the Ice Cube Project, which is putting neutrino telescopes down in the South Pole. You can see that on Ice Cube. I don't know if it's .com or .gov. It's out of Madison. But in any event, so I researched the South Pole and what would be would it be like to live there for 18 months if I took the project, right? Because it was in 18 months in Arctic conditions. And I ended up number 2 for the recruitment, which is good because I had a 1-year-old son, and it had been tough and my wife was pregnant at the time. So it'd been like, okay, I'll be back in 2 years. I'll see the family later. So, so that's the case. But yeah, so I did a lot of research on the South Pole as part of that, and then also as throughout the campaign. So kind of the premise of this was that there once upon a time, right, before recorded history, there was peaceful civilizations, your typical type of a campaign, with jungles and forests and such. Basically, the beginning of that's before recorded history. What the legends tell, a group of evil cultists with elves, half-elves, humans, combined, summoned forth a demon from beyond the land, in essence, an asteroid, right? In scientific terms, a lot of what I do is drawing it back to what would happen scientifically if this happened, but then put the magic, add the magic to it, right? So what happens if an asteroid hit the land? That was it. So basically, the setting is a premise that there was a catastrophe. It spews up the ash in the sky. Everything would freeze over. How far south was always a debate, because one of the design challenges you have is if you go beyond a certain point, you have 6 months of daylight and 6 months of darkness.
Right.
So that's
I've
one
watched
of the
Doomsday Preppers and heard some of this stuff before.
Yep, exactly. So do you set it below that point, or do you have day cycles? And we've played it both ways, and it really plays very interestingly with 6 months and 6 months.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter from a design standpoint if it's that way, but from a storyline, it makes it very intriguing because now you have a limited amount of time until it's deep winter. And by deep winter, it's darkness and frozen. So you have to grow your food. You have to do a lot of things in a short amount of time, which kind of makes for an interesting campaign setting. So we're not really sure where the city, if it's going to be across that line or not, but it'll be darn close to it regardless, right? It'll be pretty much cold the year round. The city itself is set inside of a glacier. There's glaciers above it, a mile high, and it's in kind of almost like a valley, right, to call it that. It's remained warm because when one of the things that I did is said, okay, what happens if you took Yellowstone supervolcano and moved it to the South Pole?
The hot springs and everything that keeps certain spots livable.
That was the solution. That was a solution to bringing life down to the South Pole, was to have it be essentially taking 2 geographic features in a real world, rather than say, you could say magic. But that's the easy way, right? It's magically warm there. Or you could say, here's the source of it is the volcanoes, or the hot spots, the supervolcano, the magma underneath. And so that creates a bunch of an interesting fire and ice, right, twist. You have fire, you have ice, you have everything in between.
You just don't have a song yet.
Well, I don't know. And it's kind of funny because most of this was created prior to me even reading Game of Thrones. So as I'm reading through it, I'm like, man, I think everybody's going to think I'm copying, but I really made some of this stuff up. Winter is here type of stuff. But
winter's
so now
never leaving.
It doesn't leave, right? It's always here. It's darkness is here is what you have to think about, right?
There you go.
So that's really the premise of it. So you have different spots that stay alive. I think one of the biggest challenges for players to understand is you just can't go to another city easily. You got to go up the top of the glacier and traverse a really rough, cold glacier to get somewhere else.
Right.
So part of the design of the world was for a friend of mine who he is difficult to contain in an adventure. Without true railroading. Andy, if you're listening, you know what I'm talking about, and everybody's ever played with Andy knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I really created the world to contain Andy. Okay. So it's pretty funny in our circle is that the whole world was designed to contain him, and why he still laughs about it. It's like, how do you take somebody who's a a wizard type characters from just leaving the adventure and going somewhere else, right?
Right.
And DMs struggle with that. Well, you don't have to do a railroad here, because I'll have plenty of charts for if you want to just go wander somewhere else. Pretty much what way you died, right? When you leave the city,
you've got 6 months to get there, man.
So right, and then get where,
Limited
right?
resources.
You don't even know where you're going. And so the joke has been I never really charted out a map for them outside of the city.
Gotcha.
So the ongoing joke is, why don't we have a map? And part of me was, I just didn't. It's hard to draw an ice map other than make a white sheet of paper, right?
Right.
Like it's ice, right? Except these few spots. There's a valley, but really the reality of it is that I will be putting a map together for the game so everybody can understand that will happen. But until you go out there, it's a rough, harsh going on top of a glacier. So there's certainly a lot of the campaign material will be is, what happens when you're in that kind of an environment. And that's also the lava part as well, right? Because we do have the volcanoes here as well. So there's not just ice, there's other elements too.
Cool. So it sounds like you still have some writing to do. How much of your writing is complete compared to how much you're expecting to be finished?
Well, and I think one of the things that I do by day is I have a master's in business administration. I do a lot of projecting of financials, and I run projects. So that's my day job. Yeah. And one of the things I need to project is, what's the end result? What are we delivering? What product we're going to deliver? And I think what we're looking at is probably right now looking at one book. We thought we could do 3. We have material for a book right now. So maybe throughout the Kickstarter, we could expand it and add new material, add new chapters to it. But really the material is pretty much done. The challenge is to get it into 5e, because we did play other systems. This was run in Rollmaster, Middle-earth Role-Playing, 2nd edition D&D, 3.5, and Pathfinder. So getting all that compiled into a 5e format and then running it through a playtest. So one of the things I believe strongly in is not to just throw a product at you and hope the plot works, but to really, let's playtest this and go through it. And if there's something in there that people, feel strongly about, we fix it. So my goal is to kind of create the book that, as a project manager, take input from all the stakeholders, which is anybody who are going to back our project, and make a better book, make a better experience. I mean, that's really what it's about, is what's a good adventure.
Yeah, for sure. So what are you thinking of introducing new to this that's not already in 5e?
So one of the things we looked at was races. So we reworked really all the races that are down here. So for example, the elves live on ships that glide on top of the ice. So they have like wind ships with
like skis or something.
Like skis, they're like a catamaran style ships. They use wind magic, so to propel the ships. So you've got the ice elf itself is a racial background. You have the fact that they're not integrated. There is, because everything was before recorded histories, there's no common language. Okay. So you have a racial language, but you're going to have language barriers, right? So comprehend language becomes even more important, and skills of learning languages and such become very important. So learning Elvish or learning, Ice Elf might actually be useful, where in a normal D&D setting you might never learn Elvish because somebody, they just speak common, right? So here you have different coinage systems because it was a land harsh and isolated. Everybody values something differently. So the elves value actually seashells. Seashells is their currency, which is kind of a long history to that and explained later. And so then the elf background itself, the race design for the elf. So basically they would have some cold resistance as a background. They also have some basic wind magic is a racial feature. So that's the design for that. We had to go through all the spells that were available and add in all the missing spells that were from the systems that kind of came in here that had them all that 5e doesn't have. So we're looking at, if you've ever played Rollmaster, we're looking at a significant chunk of influence coming from the Rollmaster system. Not saying they're anywhere near the Rollmaster spells. They have thousands and 5,000, but taking the essence of what they were trying to do with the magic system and putting it in 5e. So there's the spells, all new backgrounds. So we have 50 new backgrounds all designed, custom to the setting. Basically on the backgrounds, we took really what you get is if you think about backgrounds, you get a couple of skills and you get a couple things for it. We put a
Yeah.
grid out and said, okay, so we didn't want duplications, so then fit them into the backgrounds that fit within the setting. So
Yeah.
beekeepers is a good example. There's a beekeeper background. You probably would
Oh, cool.
never see that published anywhere else. But as my son, who's 12, pointed out, he's really the brains behind the whole plot line. He's helping pull all this together. He pointed out you can't really have plants in the Arctic if you don't have bees.
Right.
So that then put me into a design cycle of, okay, we've got to figure out, how do you have Arctic bees? What do they look like? Of course, they're blue, right?
It's magic.
You know?
What are you talking about?
Well, you could do it. You could do it that way, but again, I come back to I have a science background in biotech, and I've done quite a bit of chemistry and physics. So, yeah, I want to keep it to where it makes sense. I don't like a dungeon where you have one room and the next room has a different monster that could never get out of the dungeon to eat. Right. That's not there's not enough of those designs that are great classical.
Gary Gygax is rolling over in his grave right now.
I know he is. I'm sorry, but that's been done so well in the past. I can't beat that, right? You know, Keep on the Borderlands or any of those. I can't do that. I pay homage to those guys, but really what we're looking at is, what can I put together that is different. So it's the backgrounds. Feats are optional, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to let your players play them. Mostly the feats would be what fit into the NPCs. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of NPCs. So the whole setting is, if you think about it, it's not really a quest. I guess a quest is the right way to describe it, but mainly it's a political mystery solving setting. Is where we're going with my son's plot line. So he kind of, like I said, he pulled it all together. It looks great. I had originally set it up as just a random encounter kind of plot line, and he thought, well, let's weave it all together and make it a little bit of a bigger story to it, and it's done amazing. So really what we're looking at trying to do is to have the NPCs play a big part. So that's another thing we're adding, is close to 100 detailed NPCs will be in a book as well. Nice. Which you could take that and use any of those in another setting as well. Right. So there's a lot of content here that's reusable.
That's cool. Yeah, it's funny you were saying earlier, like how a lot of settings don't go down to the South Pole and the Arctic there. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, it seems like the only place you see cold weather environments is in the North in any setting I've ever seen. Including my own. So now I'm like, I should think about that a little more.
You'd have to buy the book then, because now you're done, right? You just slot it in and you have your South Pole taken care of.
Right.
We also have in Australia type setting that my son's working on, but he's going to get mad if I talk about it, so I won't go any further. So he's looking at it. So you can almost do the other side of your hemisphere, right? Because most people have one hemisphere and the North Pole, so you could just drop both of our pieces in. So
there you go.
Yeah.
The place that nobody wants to live because of poisonous spiders and everything that's terrible in the world.
Absolutely.
I have friends in Australia. They're like, it's not that bad. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, and it's funny because one of my first and biggest supporters is from Australia. So we have a retail supporter there as well that picked up our miniature line.
Right.
So it's I'm sure they'll be pleased to hear this, that, oh, by the way, my son, a 12-year-old's working on an Australian campaign setting, but we'll see where we get on that one. That's future work. So.
I just want to say I'm happy I live in Michigan, and the only thing I have to worry about is winter for like 6 months out of the year, and then on sporadic days throughout the summer we still get snow. No, I'm just kidding.
We don't have really bugs or snakes up here in Wisconsin either. So.
Right. Other than mosquitoes, right? Like that's about.
There are lake flies. We're by Lake Winnebago, so we get those that they literally cloud up your car. Which of course there's going to be lake flies. So I'll give you a hint. No one knows about that yet, but there'll be lake flies in the game as well.
Nice. So when are you hoping to launch this Kickstarter? Because obviously it's in the planning phase.
Right. So one of the things I have to do first is we're working on a map. Remember I mentioned earlier, the city map has come along really well. We've got the second round of sketches done. My background is in cartography. It's better than anything I could draw. I have an undergrad in cartography. I've published maps before. It's better than anything I can draw. So when you see it, you'll be like, okay, that's really neat. So once the city map is done, which is essential for us to have that done, to be able to show everybody like what that looks like. Part of what I want everybody to see is that we're we're putting good quality effort into the artwork. I've got a number of awesome artists that have helped me, and also in the cartography piece as
Okay.
well. And so that's what we're looking at. So I'm hoping that that completes in the next week or two, where we have a finalized version of the map. And then I need to run some more pre-advertising, and I want to fix up our website. My son, who's 12, designed it the way it is now. So what you see was done by when he was 11. We've got to get that fixed up, edited, and really make it prime time, right? So make it into a production rather than this whole thing started as a father and son project that said, "Hey, Dad, I want to run an adventure. What are your thoughts?" And I said, "Well, I have an old setting I could dust off and hand to you." And then it grew into this. So bad project manager me let the scope creep go from Jack running a 4-hour adventure that was from my homebrew notes to turning it into a product, right?
Right. No, that's cool though. Like I've got 3 kids, a 9-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 1.5-year-old, and the 5-year-old and 9-year-old love the idea of playing with miniatures and D&D, and like they love it. My wife actually got me. I used to play Palladium books. My wife got me into D&D about 10 years ago, and I had played Palladium books 13 years exclusively, like no other system. Like it was just Palladium books, and it opened this whole can of worms where now I'm like, yeah, let's start trying all these other different systems, you know. She's not as much into trying a bunch of new systems as I am, but she's coming around on that. And like I could see my daughter one day, because she's really big into creating things. She's very creative, drawing, painting, like all that stuff. I could totally see her saying, "Hey, we should do something with this and make it a book." Like, and me being like, "Yeah, let's do it." You know,
you might want to check my notes and all the effort this was to do it. Right? We'll have to talk offline. Just even like just little things, right? Mm-hmm. Like all the little things that are around it. But yeah, for a father and son with some spare change in my pocket to kind of get where we're at is amazing. I mean, the artist got us here, right? I mean, the artwork you see up here in my background, you know.
The mock-ups of the book covers that I saw look great. Like that's what really caught my attention. Like the white dragon looked sweet. You know, and the other, I can't remember the other two offhand, but like I remember going, wow, these look like, I like the color. You know, I love the colors, but it just is a really cool looking thing that's different than what's currently out there. Now D&D is coming out with their little ice thing here soon, though.
Well, yeah,
that matches the colors, but.
Well, I mean, it is, you know, Arctic. It was a little surprising because we've been in the works for over a year on this. Mm-hmm. I mean, in production works, we've been playing it for 20 years. Sure. And then when that dropped, I was like, what does that mean to me, right? And then I read more into it. I'm like, well, it could. And you know what? I'm going to buy it. I already have it pre-ordered, right? I mean, I'm all in support of Wizards of the Coast and what they're doing, and well, any other indie company as well. But especially if you do something ice related, I probably already have it on my shelf, right? From Call of Cthulhu to everything.
The previous edition Icewind Dale stuff.
I have that, right? Yeah. So it's like, okay, I read it and I'm like, yeah, I don't think we overlap at all. In fact,
your stuff seems pretty unique.
Yeah, you could drop this on the North Pole if you wanted to and just say south every time I say north, right? You could put it right above their setting in there if you want. I don't know if it fits well in the realms type of environment. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I wanted to do is to kind of change things. Like you don't have the common language, you don't have a common currency. Yep. There's just a lot of things that are unique and little things build up that are interesting. So the city itself, if you think about it, this was a refuge or a haven for survivors from the cataclysm. Okay. Yeah. So we had to kind of do the history of how do you live in a pocket universe, or I call it a pocket universe, but how do you live in an ice haven, right? And so we have some people who live in the city, and then another group of people who live out into a valley that raise the food, because you have to have food for the city. The city itself is, in a sense, almost, I guess, a way, it's a political rat's nest of infighting, right? Yeah. And of intrigue. So you could run this really without ever leaving the city. With a few excursions and get deep into the role playing of the different factions and all the events that are occurring. So while you're doing your thing within the group, the plot line will have really literally every house doing what their agenda is in the background. And by having it, a 6 months on and 6 months off, we're really looking about the first chapter for the first year. So this product will only cover really year one, if that makes sense, of the adventure. There's a lot more beyond this. So we're looking at, I haven't figured out if we're going to cut it at 10th level or 12th level exactly, but it's somewhere between 10th and 12th level as to where we'll stop. We may have some stretch goals where we'll go beyond that, like add different areas in once we know that there's enough interest in a product. There's the Ice Queen, right? Her whole layout. That's all designed. I even have the art for the cover done by the same artist that did this wonderful work, Philip. And so that's all taken care of. So we have a whole module, a module or an adventure just on the Ice Queen setting. There's other areas around here that could be dropped in as well. So yeah, that's kind of the where we're at on the background. And the valley itself has, if you think about it, it's almost like a classic Keep on the Borderlands in a way that some of it's civilized, but then the eastern part of the valley is completely uncivilized. So you have a lot of adventure options over in the eastern part.
Gotcha. So it sounds like so you've got one book that's all encompassing that takes the span of a year. You have player options. Obviously you got monsters in there. It sounds like it's left open for a game master to run it like a sandbox within a confined space. Am I right in thinking that?
You can do it both ways. You could run it as a sandbox, right, and not follow the timeline chapters, or you could. How Jack and I have designed this is we have the sandbox and we have certain events that occur. Now you could change when those events occur. The tempo of your group. So if your group gets bored of the sandbox, you could move it forward or you could move it afterwards, right? But we have a guidelines of when it would work through our play testing of when it fits in well, where, okay, we're exhausted with this, we level and do that. The challenge, I think the biggest challenge is the rapid leveling in 5e.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, every 4 hours you gain a level. Part of our guidance is going to be to stretch that out so you can have more role playing involved in it and not just, kill the monster, get your level, get your magic item kind of thing. So it's more of a understanding the whole, being immersed in it. So yeah, you could run it, you could throw out the events, or you could say maybe they don't occur. So there's a lot you could do with it, but really the adventure isn't one thing after another. It's not a railroad.
Gotcha.
There's a few railroaded pieces in it, but for the most part, it's quite a bit of options available.
Gotcha. And so the other two books I saw, are those like just expansions on the timeline then? Is that the idea?
Okay, so there were 3 books originally thought that we were going to go down. I did some marketing research and I wanted to split out the monsters into their own book. Okay. We have that many monsters designed. I already have well over 120 monster images done and the stat piece beginning to work. And I thought, well, I could add more than just stat blocks with a picture and detail them with all the background and knowledge of those. And I thought about pulling off a separate monster book. I'm still trying to see if that'll fly in today's market, right, with pre-orders. We may go with the monster book as a stretch goal and have that be, okay, the main adventure has the monster stat blocks in them, but if you want a dedicated monster book, this is what we have. But it really depends on the numbers.
You can even do that as its own thing beforehand. Here's
definitely.
Its own book.
That was the thought. The thought was to do a player's guide first, get all the components that you need to build your characters, run those through a play testing, let everybody see those. And at the risk of course, somebody else taking your product and printing it themselves, that's always the challenge you have with intellectual property. So I'd have to put some non-disclosure in there. But you could see what we have developed. And then, so there was a player's guide. How big the player's guide is right now, we're at about 120 pages that I could do. We'd have to trim it down if we go into one book, and maybe we do a separate PDF, right? It's the printing is where the challenge is, right? The extra artwork and the printing and the layouts. So it really depends financially. I haven't solved all that at the moment, which is another thing we have to do before we launch, obviously, to see if you're going to do 1 or 3. But in a perfect world, we could do 3 hardcovers. We could do a DM screen. We could do the entire product, but that we're looking at $125 to $150 for the product.
For all the hardcovers.
Right. Or you go with one, right? Take the best of everything, put it in for one, have it at a price tag of maybe 60 range with depending on with the DM screen and the PDFs and some online tools with that, and then maybe stretch goal it up. So that's maybe the route we end up going, is to say, okay, maybe we'll just offer a monster book.
Or even just add-ons. Like you could still do the player's handbook as like a $50 tier, but if you want all 3 books, do $150. And Like
Right.
there's so many
Right.
ways to look at it.
Printing's a challenge, though. You have to do 500. We really need 1,000 to get any kind of economy of scale.
Yeah.
So I'd have to know I could sell 1,000. I don't want to put 1,000 books in my attic,
Sure.
right? Or 980 books and only sell 20 of them. So
Right.
that's really the challenge, right? We could do print on demand for it. Absolutely. That would be
Sure.
another option too. But then you're going to pay probably $60 for print on demand, or 70.
Yeah, it gets a little pricier.
Maybe more. It's pretty heavy on the price range. And I don't think I'd ever recoup the artwork, to be honest with you. From what little margin I would make off of it, I don't think I'd ever be able to recover the artwork put into it.
Right. Yep, that makes sense. And I actually know some people who have done some Kickstarters and stuff that maybe I can help you get in contact with.
Oh, absolutely. And if anybody out there listening, has a better way to help do that, we are in that stage of the Kickstarter. Say, how do we become financially to where I deliver, right? I'm a project manager. I want to deliver a product that we agreed upon that, is with a quality, right? So how do I put enough art in it to make sure it looks good? And, the artists have done a wonderful job so far, and I'm hoping they can continue working with me after we fund. But I have those out on the website. I probably shouldn't have, because a couple of them have already gotten work outside with some of the big three. In fact, I think all three of them now have done some big three projects after they showed what I didn't NDA them on the art. I let them kind of put it on their pages and such, because I wanted to promote their careers. But you'll see some of this art and actually in other books coming out soon. I know there's some projects going on with the big three game companies. So so I was able to cultivate and work with some great people when they were really unpublished. Most of the artists with the exception of one or two or three, were completely unpublished in the past.
Nice. Oh yeah, there they are. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's on the site under the team. Your website isn't that bad. You were saying
my 12-year-old did the website, so we're gonna reword some of it and edit it and everything. But yeah, we want to get that kind of updated. We have new art too. Well, that was out in November. That was the art we had back in November. So you can imagine what we've put together in the last 6 months.
Right.
It's just waiting to go out there. And part of the challenge that I have with the artwork, right, is to keep it a common theme, so that it all kind of looks the same.
Similar style. Yep.
And I wouldn't call myself picky, but there's some rework that has to get done every once in a while. And the ladies and men that have helped me with this have been phenomenal at fixing up everything to kind of keep it the same. In some cases, it's hard to tell that it's two different people that did it, because they were able to kind of keep the same color palette as well.
Right. So one of the other things that we haven't talked about on air, but we did talk about beforehand, was the miniatures. So you already did a Kickstarter for it, correct?
Right. So yeah, let's talk about the miniatures. So most people would say, why would you do the miniatures before you do the setting, right? And it doesn't make any sense. And everybody asked me that, and I said, well,
I wanted to. No.
Well, that was actually the answer.
Magic,
that I finally fessed up.
I
wanted to use the miniatures so that we could have something to play with when we ran the games, right? And play test. But with that social isolation and everything right now, it's probably, a little bit off before we get there, but I will have them made, right? So when we do get together, we have all the characters. But yeah, no, the miniatures were put out there. I've contacted some professional sculptors. They put together the sculpts in 3D. We sent them over to a caster. He casted them in pewter. And the Kickstarter went really smooth. It was a relatively small Kickstarter, but it was enough to fund. We funded it in I think it was 30 minutes. We got the funding for it and mastered it and delivered a month ahead of time. Now that made it easier because there weren't that many people, right, within it. So I didn't have 10,000 people to fulfill, which is obviously right. If there's a big hit, you're going to be delayed on a Kickstarter. But the number we had, we wanted to make sure we did it right. We threw in one of the things I had out there was early bird. I did Russell surprises, which in some cases, if you understand who the Russells are in a setting, that could be nothing. In some cases, I stuffed in miniatures that I had sitting around the basement. So people got some really weird, right, Russell surprises, as we call it, right? And some were other miniatures they hadn't ordered, right, that we hadn't put out since the Kickstarter. So I stuffed in a few other things. So, and some got nothing, because that's how the Russells work, right? They're very chaotic, and it's one of the clans or factions within the setting. And the miniatures themselves, we have 21 more models that have been sculpted. So now it's just timing. Do I put those in with this launch? The challenge with Kickstarter is they only want you to do one thing concurrently. Right. And I would love to do the book and the miniatures as a separate entity because I think they're different, and then
Yeah.
add-ons for each one, right, of the other, right? So you could add the book onto the miniatures, you could add the miniatures onto the book, but putting it in one, it's hard to say you have both. So I'm still trying to structure that if I'm better
the
off.
financial side of it's hard too, because now you're taking two different things. You have two different audiences. You know, like some people are going to buy your miniatures as opposed to the book. Some people are going to buy the book, like you're saying. So mixing them is hard.
It is.
Yeah.
That's one of the I mean, I got to be honest. Anybody listening, feel free to drop me like, what are your lessons learned? I have a lot of lessons learned from all the pieces when I'm not a big, one of the big three companies with a whole staff, right, to do all this and care for it. So of people there. But the miniatures, I worked with a miniature company 20 years ago on their miniature line. And so really I kind of knew all the ins and outs of it. So this isn't anything new for me. I used to have some casting equipment as well that I had sculpted and done some of my own casting as well. But nothing like what I'm nowhere near as good as what the sculptors put together in this.
Right.
So we have
are these pewter? By the way?
Yeah, they're pewter. Yeah. We thought about doing it in plastic, but your return on investment on plastic to do it right is you need about 4,000.
Gotcha.
So if I personally like pewter better.
Okay.
I just like it better, but we could, if you had more than 4,000, if we ever get the board game that we're working on developed, we'd probably go the plastic route, and then we have all the sculpts done for it, right? So the board game and the artwork's done for it. So if we put what we have built here into a future Kickstarter, we can do the Dalreth board game as well, which is something we're working on, but I want to spend at least another year of play testing between all of everything going in now to even think about that.
So did you say a date you were planning on launching the Kickstarter for the book? Sorry, I kind of missed it.
Oh yeah, no. It's probably the end of July or early August. I don't have a specific date. Yeah, I really want to launch this in August and get it underway, and then fund it early part of September, so that we can get started on the work. Right. Yeah. So I just have to make a decision, right? I want to get the map in. I want to get a few more pieces of art in. Then I want to see what budget I have to work with to do the rest of the art. Right now we have 200 pieces of art. So if you think of about a 350-page book, that's a lot of art in a 350-page book.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of artwork. So we may very well be done with the art, right? With just a few chapter pieces to put in place and then some graphics laid out. We have a couple sample page layouts that are done. Did some marvelous work on that. How much of that I disclose on the Kickstarter is a question, because one of the challenges you have if you start putting out your material before you are ready to publish is someone else beats you to the punch on it, right?
It's possible. I think it's unlikely though. So I've gone to some seminars with like some professional companies at conventions. And a lot of them, like I hear you mentioning like NDAs and stuff. A lot of them, they'll have people pitch things to them. And as soon as an NDA is mentioned, they're like, nope, like we're not even going to talk to you about it. Just if you think it's that good. Because like they're not like in the business to steal ideas anyway, they claim. And like, so it's one of those things. But yeah, like it takes a while like to release something. So if your stuff is ready and you're doing a Kickstarter, I mean, it's easy to say, well, yeah, they stole it verbatim or whatever. But I don't know.
Right. No, but
I'd be afraid of my ideas being taken too, but I don't know.
Yeah, and it's just a fine balance there, right?
Sure.
I'm not saying any of the big three would necessarily do that, but anybody can go out and publish something nowadays. It's so easy, right?
Yeah, I could type something right now and put it up on Drive Through RPG tomorrow.
And then we get to fight over who came up with it first. If you have a better attorney, you win, right? That's not what I want to get into. The community is not that way. But I come from a business background where it is that way. We play in the business field, it's cutthroat, right? So it's all about launching intellectual property at the right time. Been through all the classes on it, so I'm guarded with some of it
too, in sales.
Yeah, then you know what I'm talking about. You want to release the information at the right time.
Yeah,
it's that. So we'll see how much we put out there on it. Probably not very much that's finished, but I also want to make it go through editing, professional editing. So a lot of what we have really needs a good polish. So we have a diamond in a rough at the moment. So that's where it's going to take some time to really do that. And we want to play test it, right? So we want to make sure that one of the things, the challenge you might have is, okay, I have this great idea, but does it really work? Is it like break the system? Is it unbalanced?
What if in play so say you fund it in August and like you are play testing it and you realize it doesn't work. I don't know. It probably will. It's probably gonna be great. But like then what? Do you just delay the the delivery, or
No,
how do
I'm
you go
going to
from there?
build the delivery. I'm going to build the playtest into the timeline, right?
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
the timeline will all be built in. So we'll just adjust on the fly, right? It'll
Sure.
be that, and the playtest will be limited in focus,
Yeah.
right? We know it's going to be an ice theme. We know it's going to be the South Pole. All the artwork's done. We just
Yep.
want to make sure that really it's that player's guide pieces, right? That are the
Yeah.
feats balanced. What
And
do
the
we need?
editing sounds like the biggest part of
And the
this.
editing piece, and then really
Yep.
going through and weaving the storyline together. So that could take us. I'm projecting out at least 10 months
Gotcha.
to deliver a real. I mean, I could say 6 months, and then in 4 months say it's delayed,
Yeah.
right? You've seen those Kickstarters before, but I'd rather tell you up front. It's probably a 10 to do this right and make it professional. Would probably be about a 10 to 12 month cycle, just to make sure everything's done correctly.
Right. Now, have you ever published anything before? Maybe it's not even game related.
Yeah, I have. I have 3 children's books. So,
cool.
yeah, I published three illustrated children's books, and so we actually have those out on the website too. If you scroll to the bottom of it, again, there's an example of those were my first experience at it, and those were from stories from my oldest son who passed away in 2009, and they were his bedtime stories. So Henry died. Yeah, Henry died about 11 years ago, and he was an undiagnosed medical condition. And
Gotcha.
and so we took his bedtime stories and published those. So it's kind of a labor of love.
Immortalized him. Yep.
Right, and that's what this is. I mean, I'll be honest with you. This whole project is taking what I've done with my lifetime and playing D&D, right, and Rolemaster and all the other games, and saying this is what I did. Right.
Yeah.
This is what I built. This is what I did. We'll polish it into 5e. We'll polish it with the right editing. Certain things are going to have to come out.
Yeah.
I have a very dark and gritty original campaign setting that doesn't play well today. Right. Things have changed in 20 years. Mine was more of where the city, in a way, they wanted to sack the city and kill every single person in the city after they were playing it. And as it turned out, some of the characters turned evil. So it was pretty interesting. Some of the NPCs in the adventure are previous characters.
Oh, okay.
And they got so frustrated with the city, it kind of came down to the politics of it. Politics aren't for everybody, right?
No.
And they got so frustrated, they wanted to burn the whole city down, right? And how do we destroy this? So those people actually turned evil, and then I took their characters and immortalized them as some of the villains.
Nice. They just happened to relocate to the Cataclysm area.
Well, I kind of wound back time. I took their characters and said, okay, they've been evil, not that. Starting at the same point and turn evil. So yeah,
it's an alternate universe. Like
well, we had originally done a time loop in the game, and I had built in a portal with a time loop that you went back in time. That's something that I've actually been overruled by the entire group. That didn't like that playing. They didn't like the time circle. So we're not doing that in this one. But so that whole part of the adventure is out. They didn't like the way it circled.
Gotcha.
So I did. It's one of those great ideas you have as a DM that sometimes just don't play out well in playing. Yeah, they didn't like it. They didn't like it. It got it all. Went back to before the Cataclysm, and so could they change it? Could they stop it? Right. That was the goal, and they, what happened. So yeah, we did a kind of a time loop with a portal, and it worked. You could do it, right? I mean, you could add that material. Who knows? Maybe I'll make a PDF up of the time zone that no one else in my group likes, but maybe everyone else likes that part too, and kind of go back to the time before it happened. Right. So one of the things, instead of doing it that way, I have an interesting thing I need to play out first and make sure it works. Is where you actually take on the roles of NPCs. You're handed the character sheets of NPCs that might be in a battle.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of like one of the things that we need to work out, and I'm working the details out, so that part of the game might be, so you may go to a battlefield site and it describes what the battlefield is. Well, one of the things that we may have happen here, and we need to play this out, is you're controlling the NPCs that actually fought at that battle. Here's their character sheets. You play it out, and if that NPC died in a battle, they're dead, right? In the setting, or that's what you determine the outcome.
It could dictate a lot.
Of that. Exactly, and so we just need to make sure that we can play that out and still write the adventure with enough sandbox to it, right? That could dictate. I could have a whole house wiped out on the first encounter, right? So then, what does that mean for the rest of the adventure if an entire faction is wiped out?
Right. That's interesting. It's kind of like the butterfly effect, you know, the whole like, oh, you went back in time, stepped on a mosquito, it changed everything, you know.
Yeah, so instead of doing the time thing, we're actually doing kind of where you're morphing into the NPCs that did it,
Yeah.
and then you have to kind of have that flow through to the present.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of your character going back, you're playing that event out,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So
Oh, yeah, I get it.
that's what we're looking at, because a lot of those events, one of the things I want to be able to do, or we just write in who won and who died and call it a day, right? You know,
Right.
so that's the pieces. I have the material for it. I have the design for it. I just need to make sure it plays out, and maybe have a few other DMs that are willing to run it with, for me to give the feedback. Right? Does this work in a product? If not, we can scrap it and just say what happened. It's easier to write a paragraph of what happened than to set up to set the whole story up for what the battle was or what the incident was. And not every group can take another character sheet and role play a 7th level bard.
Right. No,
right, and just be handed a 7th level bard and say, okay, you're that person now. It's hard to transition, so not everybody even wants to do that. So it might be where I put the actual of what expected outcome was, and you could just go with that as a DM. You don't even have to do this side.
So do you have your playtest group already set up? Like, do you already have people ready to playtest? Like,
yeah, we've got 2 groups. We are podcasting on one of those. We do have our first session out there. It was pretty disjointed because we're just getting everybody into technology, right?
Yep.
But we did record it. That's out on YouTube. If you pull up the YouTube in Dalreth, you'll see our first playthrough. We're playing through the D&D Essentials kit in that, just as a game to play, and you'll get a couple kicks out of it because some crazy things happened. Talk about making a barroom encounter the most difficult. It was even supposed to be a quick, you go get the adventure and move on, right? And D&D Essentials, and it turned out into a battle, right? That's the group I run with. But then there's also going to be a second group that's a little bit different group of people that I don't regularly run with, so I can get the feedback. And we may do one through the Kickstarter where we take that kind of input. I certainly would be looking for having some kind of a pull out 1 or 2 other groups as well to play some of the material and just let me know, right? Like almost a limited play test where you run through that.
I've seen where people have done their Kickstarter and they've released the PDFs and said, let us know, we're still working on some, stuff with like layout and stuff, but here's the PDFs, play around with it. Let us know what you think. Like, I've seen that before. And it's went well. I've seen where they've changed quite a bit in playtest too.
Yeah.
Or they release it as errata afterwards or whatever.
Oh, sure. And what we would do is, while our production date may be 10 months or a year out, the PDF releases would be as soon as they're done.
Yeah.
Right. And then we'd want to have, I do as project manager, I rely on the feedback from everybody. I'm nowhere near the expert on anything, right, in life. So, we'll just fix it, right? Now, obviously you can't please everybody all the time, but you can fix the things that are wrong, right? Yeah. Like things that just just don't work for people. And it's also possible that, within the scope of the work, you could have a couple different ways to run it. You do a little sidebar, you put it in, say, if this is not, you don't want to run this section, here's really a summary of it.
Yeah.
You keep the story going without the sandbox. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Paizo does that with their adventure pass. They release player's guides and have recommended ways if you don't like something to tweak things.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And I noticed that in one of their products they had where there was an ethical situation in it, and there was some baby goblins. And what do you do with a bunch of room full of baby goblins? I can't remember that. It was one of the first adventure paths, right?
Right.
And it was a goblin village, and what do you do with those baby goblins? It was probably the most unique role playing experience we had, and they put a sidebar in there, right? So yeah, Paizo, thank you for the putting those types of things in, because that's certainly an influence.
Yeah.
Like everybody who's come before me is, right? Everybody who's written D&D stuff from Gary Gygax on back.
So obviously with doing the one book and then possibly extending the timeline, until we see all of it released, I mean, we're talking about years down the road, probably, with like a board game and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
there could be. Cool.
Yeah. In the pipeline, so there's 21 miniatures that are sculpted.
Yep.
9
those are released or 6?
9 have released, so I have 21 more, so 30 total right now. We've got a couple of monsters that are really neat. I don't want to mention them till I'm ready to launch. I want to get them cast and painted, right?
Sure.
And that's what we're working on. So yeah, so we have those. Now I'm not sure. I may do box sets with the miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
It's tough otherwise, and I have them designed in sets of 8 to 10, so that you could do a box set on those. Makes it easier to produce, easier to. I can sell them cheaper, right?
Yeah.
And pewter, right, on those. So we've got that. I've got a wild shape deck of all the artwork's done for the wild shape deck, and about half the stat blocks are done. That was going to be what I was going to launch back in May. Was a wild shape deck. And so that was going to come out, but I didn't launch it. I probably should have. The wild shape deck itself is great because it's a druid card, right? You just have the stats on one side, and it's a tarot size card. I'm ready to go on that. That probably will be part of this one as an add-on.
Yeah.
The only thing is I can't gauge the cost as well as I could have if I knew I had 500 sales, right? Because at 500 sales of this product, then this is the economy of scale. So now I have this much more to work with to give away, right? To rewards, right? So it's going to be harder the more stuff you lump together in a Kickstarter, the harder it is to predict which one actually you're going to lose money on and which one is good that people wanted. So, and it's harder to advertise like, oh, I have a wild shape deck. I have 21 more miniatures. Oh, there's also the miniatures we already have for the setting. And then there's the book. And then, also, we're also looking at the second part of the chapter, which is a higher level adventure. That's the Ice Queen and the demon you see on the DM screen. So if you've seen a picture of the DM screen.
Now, is this a demon or is this a meteor?
I don't know. Is it? I don't know. Maybe it's a dragon, right? Maybe it's a dragon that looks like a demon, or maybe it's somebody's dream. I don't know. But there's a book on that. That'll be a lot later, right?
You would do that to me. You would.
I would. If you know me well enough. I don't know. The players in 20 years, nobody knows. Nobody knows what that is. No one's ever gotten there yet. Oh, wow. So that part of it, that's why we really need to get there again, right? The group broke down in the sense of getting through the politics of the city and the kind of the whole story there, and never really got to all the stories, right? That's how much I have developed, right? It's quite a bit of material.
I'm going to share it if it lets me. There we go. That's the picture we're talking about with the DM screen, by the way.
Yeah.
That's really cool art. I love the art. Like the look of everything looks real clean. I love it.
Yeah, and the DM screen there that shows that, you can see, what is that, who is that? That'll be some of it you'll find out in the first book, but that would be later at a higher level. I don't think you can fit all of that into 350 pages.
Right.
And
that was the original idea with 3 books, which right now we're down to 1 book, which would be
I think we're going to do 1 book. Yeah, I think just 1, and then we'll have like a PDF for players.
Okay.
So you could just have a PDF you could give to the players, and maybe print on demand if you wanted to print it. It's difficult to have the right inventory level. I'm not a warehouse, right? So what do you do with your excess inventory? And the last thing I want to do, and just kind of my ethical belief, is the last thing I want to do is fund a Kickstarter and then you go out on Amazon and see it for 50 cents because I had to dump it to get rid of the inventory. Right. So I'd rather print what I need to sell, keep what I can have as extra copies in case there's damages or if there's some extra sales, but not have so much printed that I have to dump it.
Right.
So otherwise you just wait for Amazon and pick it up there for 50 cents. And why would you buy into the Kickstarter?
If anyone out there finds any books for 50 cents, let me know. I'd like to buy them.
It happened. It's happened, not in a D&D, but you know what I mean, right? Where it's out there for cheaper, right? Half price or whatever out on Amazon. So I want to avoid getting myself in a bad situation with excess inventory. Sure. So and building upon that a little bit is, are you going to find this in a shelf in 5 years? Maybe not.
Right.
If you're not in the Kickstarter, you would probably not see it again unless we reprint to a second.
In 5 years, are we going to have game stores? I mean,
well, that's a good question. I hope so, right? All you game store owners out there.
They got to make it through this next year of COVID before, 5 years from now.
We'll make it through it. I think the challenge right now is just, not being crazy, right? Get this to stop spreading, right?
It seems like the hard part right now for game stores is because they can't do what they normally do, and that's provide an experience. You can't come in and play and sit down at a table. And that's really all a game store offers over like online stores. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
that personal interaction that you can't get now. So
yeah, I feel for those guys
yeah.
men and women out there that are trying to keep their game stores afloat.
Yeah, I have a
So
really good one down the
yeah.
street that I really like, and they are doing everything they can to still be there for the community, which is cool. So,
Yeah,
um,
and not to undermine anybody else how they do their business, but
yeah,
I don't want to, back to what I was saying, I don't want to have to dump on Amazon, which
yeah,
undermines retailers, right? I'd rather
right,
have the retailers come in, put it in their stores, and try to help them, even if they only make $5, right,
right,
off or whatever they can make after everything, whatever money they can make off investing in our project. At least they can know they can get a return on their investment and
right,
not see it on Amazon and people come in and go, I don't want it, and they have a book with dust on it.
right.
So that's my goal, is to try to be as retail friendly as I can, because they need our help. And that's to
Mhm.
everybody. We need to help them
For
to
sure.
make it through this.
Awesome. So your hard stop is up. So we got to go. But
Okay.
tell everyone where they can find you and your products.
Well, it'll be the South Pole, right? That's the ice age, right? Now the South Pole. So yeah, www.dalreth.com. And I am out on Facebook, Darrin Anderson. You probably can find me out there. You can also see the Dalreth page out on Facebook. I'm Dalreth on Twitter. People have asked, what is Dalreth? Well, that is a city name, and it's also the name of one of the gods in the pantheon. So I'll put a picture out there real soon, once the picture's done, of the city center that shows Dalreth, who's the patron of the city.
Right. Awesome.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, this was Master the Game. I'm Juice. This is Darrin, creator of Dalreth, and we will see you guys next time. Game on.
Thank you.
Thank you.